Sherwin joins us now to discuss this further. Sherwin, good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, watching some of the videos, it certainly has been a busy couple of hours for your new president. What are some of the key takeaways from Donald Trump's first hours in office and the implications these decisions could have, especially when you look at around the world?
Well, just watching the last few hours of, the first iterations of Donald Trump's return to the White House, one is reminded of a song made famous by Frank Sinatra in 1969 called My Way. I did it my way. And that is essentially what we saw from President Trump, holding court with the media after engaging with MAGA supporters at the Capital One Arena after the inauguration. He returned to the White House. And for almost an hour, Bongiwe continued to sign a number of executive orders, while very casually sort of taking questions from the media about this and that, shooting from the hip in the vein that we became accustomed to during Donald Trump's first term. And I think the broad takeaway here is that alliances, relationships, multilateralism has been put on notice. His withdrawal from the climate change agreement, his withdrawal from the World Health Organization, are things he did in his first term and is now repeating that, undercutting what, the repair that was underway when Joe Biden and his administration re-engaged and rejoined these multilateral agreements. I think it certainly will create worries within blocs like the G20, blocs like the G7, where the United States is part of a collective that tries to reach agreements based on consensus. I mean, just looking at some of the decisions here, if you take away the withdrawal, the US withdrawal from the Paris Climate Change Agreement, what are the implications of that? There is a central principle in that agreement called common but differentiated responsibilities that says, countries, developed countries in the main that have a particular responsibility for the climate conditions we are seeing around the world today because of their excessive use of carbon, fossil fuels that led to carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that is now, particularly responsible for climate change. They have a responsibility to help poorer countries in terms of that common but differentiated principle to mitigate climate change. What does that mean for developing countries in terms of the US financial responsibility, among other developed countries, to help fund the programs that seek to mitigate this? So there are very real consequences to Donald Trump's second term, and he is certainly making no bones about the fact that he is putting his thumb on the scale within hours of being sworn into a second term.
And at the same time, you think about, his hand. At some point, others were worried that it may be so tired from signing away and possibly maybe an electronic signature might be needed now. Who knows? But Sherwin, when you look at the mention of the BRICS bloc, for example, in his engagement with the media last night, let's explain the context and what followed.
Well, as I'm trying to explain here, this was a freewheeling, very casual Donald Trump sitting behind his desk in the Oval Office, signing these executive orders and taking questions. And one of the journalists asked a question about countries within the NATO bloc, including Spain and France, that are not paying the minimum requirement in terms of, I think it's 2% of GDP towards defense spending. This has been a bone of contention, certainly within the Trump administration in his first term, and it remains a bone of contention now. Trump then responded by confusing Spain as a member of the BRICS bloc. He was also then asked about whether he would be imposing tariffs on European Union countries, which again, for some reason, provided a segue to commentary about BRICS. So let me play what the president said about BRICS, and I'll come back right after. Watch.
Spain is very low. And yet, are they a BRICS nation?
What?
They're a BRICS nation, Spain.
Okay.
You know what a BRICS nation is? Well, you'll figure it out. But, and if the BRICS nations want to do that, that's okay, but we're going to put at least a 100% tariff on the business they do with the United States. You know what the BRICS is, right? You guys know.
Brazil,
you know what I'm saying, right? You know what I'm saying.
So
It's not even a threat. In fact, since I made that statement, Biden said, well, they have us over a barrel. I said, no, we have them over a barrel. And there's no way they're going to be able to do that. BRICS are 6 nations. I think it's 7 nations. And they were looking to do a number in the United States. And if they do that, they won't be happy about what's going to happen to them.
So President Trump, they're saying that BRICS countries wanted to do a number on the United States, and if they do that, they won't be happy about what's going to happen to them in response to whether Spain is paying its dues to NATO and whether he will impose tariffs on the EU. So the president clearly confused. Of course, there are 10 member states in BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, and the United Arab Emirates. But clearly intent there from President Trump, really indicating that, competition is certainly something he will be very, very much focused on. And of course, there was a statement earlier this year already, or maybe late last year, in which he put BRICS countries on notice in terms of conversations around de-dollarizing trade relations. That was quickly clarified by the Department of International Relations in South Africa. But clearly there is a bone of contention here with BRICS countries, and they might as well be put on notice, given the posture we are very quickly seeing demonstrated here by the incoming administration in the US.
And Sherwin, I wonder then, because all of this is happening against the backdrop of the World Economic Forum, right? And you are thinking about the fact that he's, of course, that executive order on the withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. Has that seen any reaction at all, particularly from the Secretary General of the UN?
Well, the SG travelled to Davos, Switzerland, so he'll certainly be participating in those WEF, World Economic Forum discussions. We understand he'll make a major policy speech on artificial intelligence at the forum in Switzerland tomorrow. But let's just quickly remind you of some of the executive orders. Withdrawing from the World Health Organization. Instituting an America First trade policy. What does that look like, right? He's instructed the trade representative in the US to reevaluate all trade relationships around the world. What does that portend? What does that tell us about the future of the African Growth and Opportunity Act? That's a trade agreement, a free trade agreement between African countries, sub-Saharan African countries and the United States. How will that be looked at, and how will South Africa and other countries' foreign policy positions and persuasions influence their continued participation in the agreement? He's talking about realigning the U.S. refugee admissions program. What does that do to, the refugee agency that is engaging with various countries around the world so as to place refugees from various conflict zones around the world in countries where they can then start new lives? He's also talking about realigning and reevaluating foreign aid. The United States is one of the biggest foreign aid donors in the world. What are the implications of that? What are the implications for programs like PEPFAR? There are very acute decisions that are being taken here that have very acute impacts and implications for countries around the world, many poor developing countries that are dependent on this aid. And so I think, we have to give them time to digest, the 50-plus executive orders that were signed overnight, but I'm sure we'll be hearing more and more reaction from around the world as this plays itself out, Bongowe.
Definitely, Sherwin, and a number of presidents have already, started to say that they're actually watching and they'll be engaging with these documents to see what exactly this means then for their governments, and it'll be interesting to hear from different countries what's their take on this one. But thank you so much, Sherwin, for that update. That's my colleague there, US Correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease, joining us to discuss some of the executive orders that the now President of the United States, Donald Trump, signed last night.